I will share my screen. Okay, you can see my screen, right? All right. Let me start with a quote from Pope Francis in the scene that we'll all remember forever, more than 1 year ago, in that dark rainy night at St. Peter's Square in his Ubi et Orbi address. And he was spot on when he said, "We have gone ahead at breakneck speed, feeling powerful and able to do anything, and we did not stop at God's approach to us. And now we are in a stormy sea." Indeed, he really, really captured the mood and the meaning and the significance of that moment. What I would like to first highlight, as we have all seen in these past 2 days, that dealing with the COVID pandemic it's not something where practical wisdom alone is enough, not just practical solutions, but it's something that needs to be addressed where we talk about fundamental values, principles, worldviews, and even ultimate purpose. I think that's something that many presenters have been saying in these 2 days. It's something that COVID is something that has really prompted humanity to relook and rethink our underlying values, our view of reality. The Pope has also said that, God is calling us to seize this time of trial as a time of choosing, a time to choose what matters and what passes away, a time to separate what is necessary from what is not. It is a time to get our lives back on track with regard to you, Lord, and to others. I would like to highlight that it's not just the COVID, but humanity as a whole is going through a very decisive moment in history. We have climate change. COP26 is going on now as we speak. Many social political upheavals in our countries, inequality, global power tensions, especially the rising tensions between the West and China. Digital transformation, religious and cultural shifts as well. And as we have seen in these 2 days, the compromise of truth. So we are really living in a critical time for humanity where we need to examine and clarify philosophical foundations, not just pragmatic solutions, but really philosophical foundations. What is real, true, and good? I would like to suggest that the Catholic Church does have something valuable to contribute to humanity's present need. In our catechism, it says that the catechesis on creation concerns the very foundations of human and Christian life, for it makes explicit the response of the Christian faith to the basic question that people of all times have asked themselves. Where does everything that exists come from, and where is it going? These two questions are decisive for the meaning and orientation of our life and actions. But I would say that although, the catechism with very good intention does put forth some answers for all these big questions of life, still we must admit that we don't have all the answers. And so what I would like to focus in my presentation today is that to witness to the joy of the gospel more effectively in a pandemic and post-pandemic world, the Catholic Church itself needs to undergo some paradigm shifts in the way it looks at mission, in the way it goes about religious communication. The first paradigm shift is from preaching to promoting a journey of inquiring together. We could safely say that in the church's current approach, we see ourselves as a teacher. We assume a didactic role, whether it's through our catechesis, education, schools, social advocacy, even our witness of life, our social communications, our digital media, our pastoral activities. We primarily automatically assume by default that we are the teacher. We have something to teach others. even if we are campaigning out in the streets, we have something to teach others. So we see ourselves like a beacon, a lighthouse, giving the light to others. And in scripture, of course, indeed we are. But in these unprecedented times, we must admit that all parties have more questions than answers. And not only that, but all parties are equally culpable. Even besides the pandemic, the church is struggling with so many internal crises itself, crisis about abuses, financial scandals, lack of governance, clericalism, spiritual worldliness, so many different things. And both society and the church have more questions than answers. I teach at the East Asian Pastoral Institute, and my students are religious and clergy undergoing doing the sabbatical or ongoing formation. And many of them say that they really don't know how to answer their people when they are asked, why does God allow COVID? How to cope with such a prolonged time of the pandemic. They themselves have more questions than answers. So this is a situation where no one really is the teacher, but and it's something that requires more than dialogue, because dialogue also assumes that we have answers to share. We share our existing doctrines. So much more than dialogue, this is a time that requires a process of seeking, learning, discovering together. So the paradigm shift I'd like to advocate, first of all, is for the church to be a fellow pilgrim. It's like a Copernican revolution. We need to see ourselves as a fellow pilgrim with others, to raise the questions together, to seek together. In talking about synodality, the Pope has said that a synodal church is one where everyone listens, which realizes that listening is more than simply hearing. It is a mutual listening in which everyone has something to learn. And this is the stance that we need to adopt. And so we might find out that when we adopt this stance, then it's the synodal experience of mutual accompaniment, of joint seeking, journeying, listening, lamenting, and healing. It is this mutuality that transforms us, not so much the answer itself, but it's the mutuality that transforms us, consoles us, brings us joy and wisdom, and helps us realize our profound fraternity, even if we have not found the answers yet. But this stance of walking together, like this group of people you see here, it is that journey of asking and seeking and trying to find out the answers together, that we feel the consolation and realize how fraternal and how connected we actually are. What are the implications then for religious communication? This paradigm shift implies that religious communication must do more of not just telling, putting out the stories and information, but to facilitate collaborative inquiry. We must create spaces for joint questioning, for exploring, expressing, lamenting safely with one another, for listening, and for discovering. It's a much more interactive space, and it's a space that requires risk-taking. It's also a space where we need to learn more methods and apply them, methods for collaborative learning and discernment. And I was very happy to hear about Daniela's method of the mystagogy, how that process can be applied too. And I find it very, very relevant to COVID, our experience of COVID as a whole. Even for myself, as I was listening to her, I feel that, I want a group where I can process my experience of the online liturgy. It's very raw to me. It's still a raw experience. I really need to sit down with people and process it, but I need a method of processing it. The example I've given here in my slide is Bernard Lonergan's transcendental method, which involves 4 steps: experience, understanding, judgment, and decision. I'm sure there are many more. It also requires a lot more intellectual humility of admitting that we don't have all the answers and that we are open to learning. So that's the first paradigm shift. The second paradigm shift is from maintenance to missionary outreach. I hear all too often from my students as well as from my peers that the churches, many of the parishes and ministers' current preoccupations is with safe distancing, maintaining, trying to restore the liturgy and sacraments in a limited way. A lot of them are bogged down with ecclesial administration, with personnel and financial sustainability. No one goes to mass anymore. They don't have the mass donations, and some are trying to do pastoral care within the limits. And I've seen how, a lot of church institutions and even parishes, they are just doing the minimum at the moment because they were so afraid of violating safe distancing rules. That's okay, but the danger is that after a prolonged period of doing just the minimum, we become trapped in what we call a tomb psychology, as Pope Francis said in Evangelii Gaudium. We become like mummies in a museum. We are very comfortable in the cave, and we just remain in the cave. Sometimes I propose to a pastor, why don't we start to open up already, because the government has relaxed the rules. And then they say, oh no, it's too difficult. You need a lot of new things to do, although people can come, but it's just too difficult. So there's a certain feeling, there's a certain lethargy that has set in after 2 years. And I'm afraid that this lethargy will continue, such that we don't open up. Even if we can open up, we don't take the risk of opening up. So that's one thing to be careful of. The paradigm shift that's needed is what Pope Francis says in Evangelii Gaudium. No, mere administration case is never enough. Let's be permanently in a state of mission. Let's reach out to new frontiers. We really need to collaborate with wider society to build back better. There are a lot of conversations taking place, building back greener, building back more sustainably. Where is the church's voice in all these conversations? I think the young people have even gone faster than us. Also, we need to help people to pause and recover depth in life, as what Laudato Si is saying. This time of COVID is really a very opportune time to get people to stop and think and go deeper, and also to help society regain its soul after this time of really a crisis, where all our strengths and weaknesses are exposed. So the implications for religious communication is first to venture out to new audiences, to take risks, go out to non-believers, even business community, secular tertiary institutions, civic networks, local neighborhoods, Generation Z, etc. Don't just stay within the comfort zone of your Catholic audience. The second implication is that we must also promote individual and collective reflection. Social media has a tendency to make things very superficial. So we have to counteract that. We have to promote discernment about ultimate truths and values, and bring people to the depths of their hearts and minds, where a genuine conversion can occur. We have to promote deeper reflection. The third paradigm shift is from exclusive to universal languages for divine truths. What do I mean by that? The current style of discourse in the church's evangelization is a very inward looking. There's a lot of direct use of religious language. We talk about sin and salvation. We talk about sacraments. There's a lot of so-called church speak, which a lot of people nowadays don't understand and don't relate to. And so our way of communicating, not all, I'm just saying, there's still some, it tends to be doctrine-centered rather than audience-centered. Really like the presentation just now about empathy. Think in terms of the audience's point of view. We tend to have conventional notions of God, and when someone else has a different notion of God, we straight away reject them, or we criticize them and cut them off and put them down. And so as a result of all these limitations, we lack connection with today's listener, with today's audience. We really lack a connection with them. There is exclusivism. Only the in crowd understands what we are talking about. Misunderstanding as well. And we increase the church society boundary, and we draw a thick line between us and them. So the COVID crisis and other crises really shows that humanity is groaning and groping for meaning and for answers, for the principle of existence. So the paradigm shift that we need to make is to adopt more universal and relatable notions and languages for divine realities, and not just stick so strictly to our existing languages for God. Also, again, the previous presenter highlighted Jesus's way of teaching, where he used everyday concepts like nature, food, and relationships, rather than abstract religious ideas. In that way, the non-Jews, the Gentiles, can relate to it, and they feel included. They feel like he's talking to them. So, likewise, today, when we communicate, do the non-Christians feel included? Can they relate to what we are talking about? Or do they see us as well educated? So that's where we have to examine ourselves. And if we make this paradigm shift, we can re-achieve again a re-enchanted world. Charles Taylor talks about a disenchanted world where God is really separated out. But, relationship with God is meant for all humanity rather than just one religious community. So the implication for religious communication is first to listen, not to start by talking, but start by listening. Listen to the language of people today. How do they experience the divine? How do they express it? And to enter through their door, and then to learn from them, to expand our notions of God. Let me give you an example. Alan Lightman, he's an atheist. He regards himself as an atheist. He's a physicist as well as a novelist. And in this wonderful book that he wrote, Searching for Stars on an Island in Maine, he writes this description. He shares this feeling he had on one night when he was in a boat looking out at the stars in the dark sky, like you see in this picture. And he writes, I felt an overwhelming connection to the stars, as if I were a part of them, and the vast expanse of time extending from the far distant past long before I was born, and then into the far distant future long after I will die, seemed compressed to a dot. I felt connected not only to the stars, but to all of nature and to the entire cosmos. I felt a merging with something far larger than myself, a grand and eternal unity, a hint of something absolute. And this is an atheist talking. So if we open our ears and we are more open-minded, and we can listen to them, then we catch their language and we try to enter through their door.
Again,
yes.
5 minutes left.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Another novelist, Meira Chan, also writes that a nameless presence within us all, so often hidden or forgotten by our everyday selves, provides calm and resilience in the face of adversity, if we will but acknowledge it. So they may not be explicitly talking about God in the way that we think about God, but they are talking about something. What is that something? It's something special, something deep, something divine. So we need to be open to listen and to enter through that door and explore together with them. The fourth paradigm shift is from theoretical discourse to contemplation. And the current tendency is that we focus on literary and rational forms, verbal and rational forms, and we go for cognitive clarity and precise definition. You know, what is salvation? What is sin? What is God? Who is Christ? What is the church? But the current crisis require confrontation with profound truths, which are often beyond words. So the paradigm shift we need to make is to go into more contemplative forms of knowing, knowing inside the human heart. And Gaudium et Spes says that we plunge into our hearts, into the depths of reality when we enter into our heart. The International Theological Commission says that it's also an instinct. You know, it's not just rational deliberation. It's spontaneous. It's different from objective knowledge. It's a knowledge of the heart. Again, another atheist writes in this way that, you know, he felt something very deep, very real, very sure. It is not just in verbal terms, but he knows it. He feels it. He knows that's true. He knows it deep down in our heart. So in our religious communication, how do we facilitate what I would call epistemologies of the heart, something that go beyond words, contemplation, aesthetics, nature, and all that, including silence? How do we encourage contemplation in a world of 24/7 media? And I have here a quote from St. Ignatius of this kind of inner realization that happens to him in a moment of contemplation. Also, there are images that can invoke a deep resonance beyond words. So how do we use that? And the final paradigm shift is in terms of how we approach mission, playing a dominant and leading role in our institutions. But you know, we by doing this, we invoke suspicions of proselytization, and also there are new protagonists. So we need to do more collaboration and networking. And this is where we need to find out where the key activities are taking place and collaborate with them. And when we collaborate, we can promote dialogue towards universal values and ultimate truth. Here I have some quotations, and I think you will well know already of how it is possible for humanity to have a sense of universal absolute truth, to know what is right. How do we know what is right? We have that interior sense deep within us, and it is possible. So these are the 5 paradigm shifts that I propose we can adopt as we go through COVID and beyond.